holiday break, I've been playing a lot of Harvest Moon 64, and I mean a lot. Something like 10 hours worth over the past couple of days. Like I'm almost through with the first year. I'm kind of startled how long the game actually is. Well, I suppose like you eventually stop seeing new events after a certain point. Like the game is technically endless. Like I don't know if you can trigger new events going like after the game technically ends, but like, I'm intent on finishing this game, okay? I have like another full year to go before like I get evaluated on my farm and see how I did. But like, I was thinking about how much fun I was having, right? This is the most fun I've had with an N64 game in a long time. And that's because this is an N64 classic that I did not grow up playing, okay? It's not a game I've played to death. It's not a game I know everything about, and I found myself kind of rattled by like how hardcore the game actually is, how dark it is, how much is going on. Some of the characters and their relationships and the plot lines. Like, there's some shocking stuff here. Like how Ellie is getting groomed by her boss. That's like, it's like, it's like, wow, this is some of the most sinister stuff I've seen in any game ever, and it's kind of downplayed. It's kind of incredible, but I'm playing Harvest Moon 64. I'm playing this game. I'm playing like got married to Maria. Who is best girl by the way. I'm like working the farm, preparing for the year, and I was thinking to myself like, wow, even in 2023, Harvest Moon 64 is still better than Stardew Valley. Okay, it's crazy that like this classic N64 game, which is like over 20 years old now, it released in '99. This all classic, probably one of the better third-party games on the platform. This game that like, the codifier for Harvest Moon, the game that really really established it as a classic. The one that like is still a fan favorite today. The beginning of a long line of a successful franchise, that fell off at some point. Harvest Moon 64. An N64 game is still better than Stardew Valley. It looks better, it plays better, it's more traditional, it's more based. The characters are more likable, the story is better, the mechanics are better thought out. Like, it's crazy that like Stardew Valley exists in a time where like the developer can just kind of like update the game and add more stuff to it, and yet nobody really cares. Okay, like it's kind of a meme in the community. Like anybody who knows Harvest Moon, like Stardew Valley really does feel like it's only appealing to PC gamers because PC gamers have never really had access to Harvest Moon, right? They had no idea what they were missing out on. So when people were bragging about like, oh, this is the most unique game ever made, you get to run a farm, and then normal people were just like, oh, it's just like Harvest Moon. Like that was kind of the thing back when Stardew Valley was still popular, right? How often Stardew Valley fans would brag about the creative concept of running a farm and then being informed that it's basically just a copy paste of like the classic Harvest Moon games. Like they would just shut down, right? They didn't want to admit it. They didn't want to admit they were like supporting plagiarism. They didn't want to admit that the game wasn't really that unique or special, and that the only reason Stardew Valley didn't have an alternative was because Harvest Moon had fallen off a long time ago. Like it it's a shame, right? It's one of those examples of just how bad things are in the modern gaming industry, where you have people who are like settling for mediocre products because they don't know what better alternatives are out there, right? They're not aware of just all these great games that are out there. They don't have the consoles, they don't have the games, they don't have like the knowledge about like what gaming was like in the 90s and mid 2000s, right? It's kind of incredible like going back and seeing just how many good Harvest Moon games came out in like the mid 2000s. You have like the Friends of Mineral Town, which I'm told is like the best one in the series. Like you have like the GameCube ones. Like I think the series was still good for like until 2010 or so, right? Until like I don't know when the decline started, but like at that point we had Rune Factory, right? Like Rune Factory 4 is one of my favorite 3DS games of all time, and yet um those games fell off too. And so like we're in this weird era now where a lot of these copycat games are trying to establish themselves as like the peak of this genre, right? And I really don't think Stardew Valley really has much of a claim to fame at all, right? When I look at its competitors, like Harvestella looks like it's outdoing it, like Fae Farm looks like it's outdoing it. Like when I look at like classic Harvest Moon, like that's outdoing it. When I look at like classic Rune Factory games pre-5, like that's outdoing it, right? Like Stardew Valley really does feel like it only has an audience because it was made by like some woke like Toby Fox like advocate with woke advocate with like connections, right? Like it was so weird seeing people like just try and shill this game. Like, oh, I've never played Harvest Moon, but this is the greatest thing ever. Well, play Harvest Moon, genius. Like you don't know what you're talking about. And this isn't a problem unique to Stardew Valley, right? You know, I've been very open about how much disdain I have for Undertale, for Pizza Tower, for like a lot of these like knockoff Nintendo indie games that have been propping up recently. Like War Groove is kind of a problem. The justification for it has always been like, well, these games don't get made anymore, but that's really not true. You know, Advance Wars got a re-release recently. You know, Wario Land got re-released recently. Like these games still exist. Like why not produce something that's actually more creative? Like why not actually innovate? Why not do anything? And that's been a problem with like the majority of indie devs. Like 90% of them is that they can't do it. They don't have the talent. They can't produce anything of value. They can't innovate. They can't evolve. They can't really do much at all aside from just cry about like, well, it's not plagiarism. We were just inspired. I know it's the exact same thing, that it has the same music, but we're trying our best, okay? Like again, the indie scene has been a joke for a long time. Like I feel like anybody who says that indie games are going to be like the savior of gaming are just deluding themselves. It's crazy looking back 10 years ago and seeing people hyping up stuff like Braid, like Super Meat Boy, like World of Goo, stuff that like nobody really cares about today, right? Like people will hype those games up as like major milestones for like the indie gaming world, but in reality, they're not that impressive. They're not that big of deals. You know, like Binding of Isaac is a good example. Like people hype these up as like the greatest things ever, but like in reality, they're really not that special at all. Like I'm tired of the generic indie roguelike. Like I'm at the point now where if I see a game has roguelite elements, I will not buy it, right? Because that's just such a major flag for me, right? Like I'm tired of like the terrible pixel art that somehow is less impressive than like games from '91. You know, I'm tired of like the music not being impressive. I'm tired of like developers not knowing how to balance gameplay and like sprite work and like it's crazy. It's embarrassing how much like how many of these products just pale in comparison to like games made in the 90s, like even now. And I don't think that's going to be a trend that changes. I think the indie scene is just flooded with copycat products that kind of miss the point of what made these original games so good. And more, I hope people start like acknowledging this and addressing it and just start calling this out for what it is because I don't think there's a whole lot of talent in the indie development scene right now.